So tonight we have Henry Rollins here, Brave New Conversation, an author, singer, activist, host, KCRW, other radio shows from 103.1, and a personal hero of mine, someone who opened up the world to me. Brave New Conversations and Henry Rollins. I wanted to talk first about some of the travels that you've done just recently. You just got back a couple of nights ago. You've been pretty much all over the world in a fairly short period of time, and we're still actually doing your radio show at KCRW from the road on the street. One of my favorite shows while you were gone, you were on the road in Yogyakarta, sitting outside apparently with like a card table, and I don't know how you're actually doing it, but the sounds of the street were going by, in between you playing some really amazing music, and you were talking about the music of the area. You went to some bizarre places, and I'd love to just find out how you chose those places and, and kind of what makes you have the travel itch and why you travel so much, because I know it can be so exploratory.
Well, this particular trip was 8 weeks. And the two hard targets was the first part of the trip was an opportunity to go to Saudi Arabia. A friend of mine, he's a diplomat, he was there for 2 years, he's leaving now. And he wrote me and said, hey, me and the wife, we're in Riyadh, you want to come and visit? And to get a visa for Saudi Arabia, that's not a business visa or a religious visa, is very, very difficult. So I said, well, here's my chance to go see Saudi Arabia. So I went. And the other place I needed to get to was Bhopal, India, for December 3rd, which would be the 25th anniversary of the methyl isocyanate gas leak by your friends at Union Carbide. And so those were my two things I wanted to do. The in-between, it's like a few weeks apart. I said, well, I'll fill it in. I'll work my way northeast up to India by going to Brunei to catch my breath, into Indonesia, up to Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, then to Kolkata, up to Delhi, down to Bhopal, and then I looked at the map and went, oh, wow, there's Nepal, okay, and I better check out where all my clothes come from, so I better go to China. And so that's how I picked the trip. It was basically about Saudi Arabia and Bhopal, and the rest was just like, haven't been there yet, and I just filled it in. And the why is because travel to places like this. And last year I spent a lot of time in Southeast Asia. I was in Burma and Vietnam and Cambodia and Laos. The year before, I was Pakistan, Iran, Syria, Lebanon. You see what globalization looks like on the other end. Like if globalization is a whip, and America has the handle of the whip, the lash lands in India, the lash lands in Bangladesh, it lands in Cambodia, where the Gap makes their clothes, where the plastic bottles go, where the pesticide goes into the groundwater, and people are drinking it, and the kids are having developmental problems. And so a great way to learn about your country is to leave it and to see how it manifests itself in other places, in third world countries, developing economies, and developing nations. And that's why I go to these places. No tour guide, no real plan besides I'm going to hit the streets and shake hands and ask questions and see what happens next. And that's why. And these trips are, I had some amazing experiences on this last go-around.
Well, if you got to Saudi Arabia first, talk about your experiences in Saudi Arabia. I know landing there and just seeing the opulence must have been kind of shocking.
Well, I've been to a lot of countries in the Middle East before. I've been to Iraq, Iran, Syria, Lebanon, Abu Dhabi, Dubai, Bahrain, Qatar, Kuwait, Iraq, well, let's see, yeah, that's kind of the whole area, not Yemen yet, but not Saudi Arabia. So the skyline of Riyadh kind of looks like Dubai. These, cutting edge architecture, the 100-floor high building that has the 4 seasons. It's space age. You see the very crass 2-tier system in Riyadh. There's the royals and the very rich and everyone else who cleans up after them. That is a living room of one man's 3 wives. All 3 mansions for all 3 wives are on his property. He has his own house, so he has his time alone. This is 1 floor, 1 room of 1 house on this massive piece of property. And to pay back the locals, he built a huge mosque across the street for everyone else to go worship. And so I was able to hang out with a few rich people and kind of, well, see how they live. And it looks kind of corny to me. And like, you know, you couldn't sit on anything because it would break. And it was like, wow, no taste and a lot of money. And so it was interesting. And to talk to young people who are going through being young, dealing with Sharia law was fascinating. I hung out with a young guy and a young girl, and even for them to be in the car with us was illegal, like a big no-no. And me and my friend, the diplomat, and this young man, we would go into a place and go get something. The nice girl has to wait in the car because it is illegal for her to be out with us, to be seen with us in a store or anywhere public because we're not married to her, nor are we a blood relative. And I said, wow, that's just so ridiculous. And she said, that's not half of it. And she described a lot of the same sex episodes that happen because there's no one, you're 16, there's no one to play with but your dorm mates. And so, well, okay, any port in a storm. And it's just so, and no one gets socialized. You know, if you meet your husband at the altar, and it's just so awful. You know, no movies, no booze, no rock and roll. And I went out with one guy one night, and we went to a shisha house where you smoke the hookahs. And there's a bunch of men watching soccer and smoking those big pipes with the apple-flavored tobacco or whatever. I go, what's the upside of this? They go, we got nothing else to do, man. We can't, it's not like we're going to a bar. It's not like we're going to the rave. It's not like we're going to go hang out with the chicks and go get a malt. This is Saturday night for us, man. We go to the shisha house, we kick it, and then we go home in our cool cars. It was trippy.
Well, I mean, it talks a lot about a society that's kind of eradicated any real culture. Whether you talked about in one of your
well, everything's an import item.
Yeah, but also they don't. You said there were no stereos in any of these homes. Like there's no music. They're not listening to anything. They're not seeing plays. They're not watching movies. And so it's taken away that one part of the human being that seeks out that finds nourishment from art. And they don't have it. They have all this money, but they don't have anything to nourish them in that way.
Right.
But you went on a tour of a oil refinery, or
well, I went to Saudi Aramco. And luckily, one of the diplomats used to work there. So we got the cool inside tour and the free tour of the museum, which is fascinating. And Saudi Aramco basically is this royal family oil company. They have their own, Saudi Aramco has its own campus where women are allowed to drive, because women are not allowed to drive in Saudi Arabia. And it's huge. Like there's a school there, there's a hospital there. The kids play sports, because it's hundreds of people from America, from Europe, from everywhere else there to do business. And me and my friend Steve, the diplomat, we took the tour, which was amazing. And then we went to the commissary, where they have every food group known to man represented. Prices were great. We went to the shopping mall on the campus, bought everything from Dentyne to Listerine, paid with any currency. And then we left back into Sharia land. And they have thousands of employees all over the world. And the tour guide told me 87 or 86% of them were Saudi. And I said, and I went, mm-hmm. And in my head, I'm going, you liar. Come on. It was just a country that's living on some idea that is just kind of like anti-life, anti-human, zero fun factor. And you got to be sneaky. You got to get around to have some fun. I asked the young guy and the young girl, I go like, well, you're young. Don't you find ways to, you know? And they're like, oh, yeah, we're sneaking around. We're hooking up. We're, you know, figuring it out. But you got to be really careful.
One of the things I wanted to ask is kind of knowing a little bit about your background and how you grew up. The kind of chicken or the egg thing, the punk rock, with what it did for me, was expose me to a new world and new ideas that I never would have gotten from my family or my surroundings, and it led me out of East Texas. So I wasn't political until punk rock. Were you political and thus found punk rock, or were you punk and then found your politics?
I was politicized at a very early age, being born and raised in Washington, D.C. Not, you know, some people say, oh, I'm from D.C. Yeah, where? Arlington. That's Virginia, pal. Like I come from, you know, I'm not trying to impress you. I'm saying I came from inside the fractured diamond. And born in 1961 with a mother who worked for the Democratic National Party. She was on Humphrey's election campaign. She worked for health education and welfare, I think until like Reagan killed it. And then she worked for national education and planning. Basically, Johnny can't read, why, and let's fix it. And so my mom was at every rally, and we sang Kumbaya and Michael Row Your Boat Ashore with Pete Seeger as bottles of Gallo wine were passed around. And my mom's gay friends had berets and cool mustaches, and they took me to the park. And my conservative divorced father hated her guts and said some really crass things to me. Like, your mother's a good woman, I want you to respect her, but she likes spades, so you don't have to take her too seriously. I'm 8, thank you, Dad. And so going to a public school in Washington, D.C. for the first 3 years of my life, where I'm one of like 5 white kids. The school is 2 blocks from my apartment. Everyone else is coming from Anacostia or somewhere else. I get called cracker, white, you know, whitey, and I'm like, well, what is this? I didn't understand it. Racism, I didn't understand racism, so my mom explained it to me, and she told me one of her best lies. So, you know, because the main fear when you're young is humiliation. He's going to scare me and make me do, and everyone will laugh at me. Oh, look at the white boy, he's shaking, and they would make me really tremble because they go like this, you know, and I'd be terrified. So I said, well, what if I cry? And she said, well, just smile and say, hi, my name is Henry, let's be friends, and no one will know you're crying. If you smile, no one will know that you're crying. I knew it was bull, but I wanted to believe it so bad. So these kids were like, yo, and I'm like, oh, my name is Henry, I just want to be friends. And at one point when a kid hit me in the face and said, you killed Martin Luther King, I'm like, okay, I gotta, and I asked my mom, I go, Mom, what is this? And she said, honey, it's a very difficult time in America right now. You didn't kill anybody. These kids they're hearing the wrong thing. Don't you ever return that favor and be racist. And I never was. But by the time I was 10, I understood racism because I had a racist father. And I understood the have and have not thing. And I watched my schoolmates not make it to the next grade and not even be all that perturbed about it, like failed. It's like, okay, Jim, you're going to be here in the 2nd grade next year. And they're like, all right. I'm like, boy, if I had failed, I would have, like, you know, jumped off a roof. And so that politicized me. And then punk rock really turned the corner for me because the DC punk rock scene was like all 20 people at the hippie commune. That's where we used to see the punk rock gigs at a place that's now famous called Madam's Organ in the Adams Morgan district. And it was run by hippies who let the punk rock bands play. And in the crowd would be 2 guys, white Rasta dudes with their big caps, 2 black Rasta guy with their big caps, the local communist guy, and the 2 other weirdos who got beat up in school by the varsity quarterback. And we were all like thick as thieves because like that Bobby Bird song, I know you got soul because if you didn't, you wouldn't be in here. If you got into that place, you must be cool. And so you'd walk in there like, hi, I'm Henry. Oh, hey, man, I'm Omar. Like, all right, we're cool. And it is the first time I made friends with just divergently thinking people. And we'd go to someone's house, listen to the Velvet Underground, and talk about things until dawn. And it was a great time to be young and hear about all this stuff. And being in Black Flag, as I was, during the Reagan administration, and touring Europe during the Reagan administration, and having so many kids coming up with their pamphlets and you people are a nuclear threat to the world and Reagan's a fascist. I'm like, oh, okay, I'm uploading all of that. So for me, punk rock and Joe Strummer and The Clash especially politicized me further, you know, and punk rock really made me read between the lines, question my government, question the media, question everything. And it was a real wake up for me. It was like, come on, man, like stop looking through the rose-colored glasses before it's too late. So yeah, punk rock was huge for that. And your story, you know, being in Texas, a very conservative part of the world, and where the independent alternative music scene gave you a real contrast where you went, wait a minute, got to leave the bubble. I've heard that story from so many people from Arkansas to anywhere else. Where they, yep, I heard punk rock and I packed my bags and I left home for the city because I couldn't deal with this anymore. Arkansas became a thing around my neck and I had to split. Yeah, you never come back. Once you're emancipated like that, you kind of go, wow, I love my hometown and I must go.
Yeah, it's a good place to be from.
Yeah.
Never be back again. Well, so with all of the travel, with being in Black Flag, with that politicization, your lyrics from early Black Flag to the Henry Rollins Band have covered these issues, from political issues, whether they're national to international, but your writing, from your poetry to your prose to your journal writing and your books and your website now, has really transgressed and gone and made a really wonderful arc over the years, and is now very sensitive. And you have a very good eye for finding detail in some of the bleaker moments. In Sri Lanka, you talked about the nature. You know, a country that's been through civil war, had the tsunami, has just been devastated by so much recently. And what you were finding was the beauty outside of the city and the nature.
Well, Colombo's one thing. It's a loud, honking, vigorous city, really fun. And then you go into the mountains, into Kandy, and it's just pastoral and beautiful, and the towns are smaller and more quiet, the traffic's not as insane, and the people are just so nice. I walked down, it was raining that day, it wasn't the best day to be out, but I was there for about a day, staying with a family, and everyone was so nice to me. You know, the English, they didn't speak very good English, like, where are you from? America? Oh, good, Obama, yeah, who's a worldwide hit. He is #1 with a bullet. Let's not say bullet. He's loved. Like, every cab driver, I get it, you know, if they know any English, I'm like, okay, what do you think of Obama? Obama, #1. You think they're talking about Freddie Mercury. And I go, Bush, they're like, not so much. And one fellow was driving me to the airport a few weeks ago, and he said, Obama, fast mind, very fast mind. I went, yeah, that's cool. And so he's a worldwide hit, and he's making it really easy to travel. Like, because everyone's like, America, hey, you got it right this time. You're like, yeah. Because I've traveled through, you know, I've done travel and press through the last several administrations. And I do more interviews than anyone I've ever met. I'll say yes to anything. And during Reagan, Bush 1 and Bush 2, cynical. So, what's up with that? 8 years of Clinton, hey man, we love you! And the hackles come up, and audiences regard you like, so did you vote for, well, where are you with that? And it's been interesting seeing the cynicism kind of lower. And I'm doing a lot of European interviews right now for these dates I have coming up. And I did a bunch of interviews today with people in Prague. And they're all just like, hey man, looking forward to seeing you. Yeah. And it's, you learn a lot about your country by leaving it.
But I think, were you also in, it might have been Dhaka, where you wrote about going into the slum?
Yeah, there's a large slum behind the hotel. It's a huge slum. It's called Karel. It's the Karel slum.
It was some of my favorite writing that you did on your trip that was on your website. And just looking at that and coming from the United States, I mean, one of the things that I always, when I leave the country, is just looking at the differences in the way that we get to live versus other people in other places, and knowing that we have so much and seeing how we use what we have so poorly most of the time.
That's the Karel.
And seeing people doing this, cutting off the needles of syringes.
Yeah, they're going to repurpose the needles.
What were you thinking when you were going through? You talked about how you walked in and just got lost. And,
well, yeah, this is a series of small little alleyways, and like within a minute and a half, me, no sense of direction. I'm like, okay, I'm going to be in here for a while because I have no idea how I got here. And I walked by these guys, and I see a bunch of needles. So I went up to him. I said, are you guys being very careful? And he spoke enough English. He said, yes. And then he started jabbing that needle at his friend's face. You see his friend like going, hey, what are you doing? And I said, would you guys please be really careful as a favor to me? And they said, yes. And to the left, a bunch of guys were cleaning IV bottles. So this is where all the garbage goes to get picked through, recycled. And I spent 2 days in that slum, walking through it, being followed by kids who like the fact that you'll say hello when they say hello. It's the best thing they've ever. You're the best video game that ever walked through. So they say hello, I go hello, and they're like, he said hello, and they just follow you for like half a mile, going hello and laughing whenever you say hello back. These guys followed me around, and. Look, it's just such great kids. That's a garbage picker, that woman. I asked if I could take her photos. She said, wait, and she put her scarf on, then she let me take photos of her.
And all of these people know Obama and know of the promise that we potentially could have with this person coming in, or at least they feel that our country has promise right now.
Yeah, well, Bush terrified people. And like I said, I did a lot of traveling during the Bush administration, and I spent a week in Tehran and hanging out with some very people. They're great English, I could really have a conversation with them. I said, what do you think of America? We love you guys. Okay, half of them schooled there, they have relatives there, fine. What do you think of my president? I go, we are terrified. No hate, just fear, because we don't want to die. He rattles his sabers at us pretty hard. I go, what do you think of our invasion of and occupation of Iraq? They said, we fought them for 9 years, and all our friends are dead. You go have fun with that. And I said, well, what are you guys into? What are we into? Literacy, babies, and the future. What are you into? And I said, did any of you vote for Ahmadinejad? And they said, that's psycho? No. And I said, are your elections corrupt? And they said, how are yours? Let's see, Ohio, Florida, Diebold machine. I said, how do you know about that stuff? They go, BBC World News. What do we think, we live in caves? And so the promise of Obama is big, and it's a huge step for America to elect an African-American man. That's huge. It's the announcement heard around the world. And I think the world is ready to give America a shot at sanity and rationality and a peaceful, greener, bluer future, maybe. Now he's got to deliver.
Well, so when you were traveling, you were in Afghanistan a year ago?
I've been to Afghanistan twice, 04, 05, 05, 06, something like that. Okay.
Well, but you were on the road on your trip
Afghanistan.
When he announced that he's sending 40,000 more troops in. What was the reaction then? I mean, because that feels, here at least, like a huge letdown. Even though he campaigned on it and we knew we should have expected it.
Yeah. To be fair, it's not like he switched horses.
No, not at all.
Midstream.
But he, 8 days after he was given the Nobel Peace Prize, or before he was given it, he makes this announcement, and it's kind of a crestfallen feeling of more of the same. Yeah. What was the reaction on the other side of the world?
Honestly, I did not get in a discussion with anyone about that. Not that I can remember.
But let's talk about your time in Afghanistan and also what you think about what's happening right now with the troop increase and whether or not we'll ever be able to get out of there. But 04, 05, when you were there last, what was the experience like and what was really happening on the ground at the time you were there?
Well, Kabul was ankle high. It's just a city of rubble. That's the Bagram base. That's Russian war junk left over. Tank, jet engine, assorted stuff. Behind me, it was a pile of MiGs that had been forklifted into a pancake. I climbed up them, and some guy said, all those ejector seats are live. It'll rip your head off. Please be careful. But that's Bagram. It's huge. Kabul was leveled. Most of the roads I drove around and choppered over in a Chinook to forward bases. I went to the Pakistan border, to the coast base, Gardez base. It is some of the most inhospitable, tough terrain I've ever seen, littered with war junk. Kids swinging from the cannons on, it's the local jungle gym is the demolished tank. That mined everywhere, mine signs. Went to a hospital, met kids with missing legs because they went over there, shouldn't have done that, kaboom. Because as you know, Afghanistan is the most anti-tank and anti-personnel landmine country in the world. And they're still very live, it's still a real threat. There's like bomb pens and toys still left over, kids pick them up. And so the state there, it looked awful and getting worse. And when you go there as an invader or an occupier, you are playing the away game. And if you look at your short or long history of Afghanistan, no matter how many centuries back you want to go, Alexander, Genghis Khan, the Brits, the Russians, and now us, steeped in hubris, thinking somehow it's going to be different for us. And it's a combination of male ego, the Pentagon going go, go, go. And to save time, look at any conflict and just see who's getting rich off it. And who's benefiting from our presence in Iraq or Afghanistan? Triple Canopy, Carlyle, Halliburton, Bechtel, Koch, companies like that. They never want this to end. They want it to go and go. When you sell bullets, your only drag is peace. If you sell ordnance, war, you pray for war. And so I think, Eisenhower warned us. We didn't listen. And I think Barack Obama is a good man, and he went in with the best of intentions. But to do, your troop surge, go in hard, get out quickly. I think we're going to go in hard, lose a lot of soldiers, because there'll be more targets, because whatever version of the Mujahideen or whatever is there, we'll leave one way or the other. And my theory is, if we left and bombed Afghanistan with rice, solar panels, wheat, PVC piping, and medicine, and after a few square meals and 8 hours of sleep, I think the locals will take out the Taliban and Al-Qaeda like they did Alexander, the Mongols, the Brits, the Russians, and us if we hang around. So I think this is completely ill-advised. I have the feeling Barack Obama is a little smarter than I am, and he probably has a little bit more privy to sensitive information than I do. But being a fan of history, I think there's nothing to win in Afghanistan. There's nothing there to do but make Al-Qaeda and other extremist groups have a talking point and have these little fires start all over the place, and to make Pakistan a more charged environment. And Pakistan is a fair weather friend at best. The territory beyond the Durand line is a no man's land where a lot of bad guys are probably doing everything from running drugs to hanging out waiting for us to come on in to have a look-see. I would love to leave.
Well, so what, here in the United States though, I mean, we've been there now for going on 9 years. Iraq had a very clear mistake on our part. We were going after something that, or our rationale was something that was untrue. Yeah. And it incensed the population. We actually saw huge rallies, protests, marches, anger on the streets. We're talking about Afghanistan all the time now in the United States. Brave New Films puts out a movie about Afghanistan that gets people talking, but no one is angry. No one seems to be taking to the streets, at least. And we've been talking about here, how can we get people, what do we need to do, what information needs to get out there to actually get people to the streets? What would you think would make it happen?
How do you get people to go on the streets and say, let's get out of Afghanistan, when they're watching their 401k disintegrate, when they're looking at foreclosure, when they're working 50 hours a week and getting 75% of what they used to make? And then you say, oh, and now go out on this. And they're like, really? Why don't you give me some money and say something nice to me? Because I'm freaking out right now. And so in a time of economic turbulence, I think it's very hard for people to think civically all the time. And I'm not being down on Americans or people. I'm just saying that's how humans tick. You freak them out with their bank account, and they're like, all of a sudden, they're like, whoa, whoa, whoa. I'm not doing anything for anybody but me and my kids right now. So you can hold on to the sign for just a minute. And so I think that's going to be kind of a hard thing to get people to assemble in downtown DC or in Seattle or somewhere right now. And also with Afghanistan, there is a plausible enemy there, in that it is possible that there's like 200 Al-Qaeda guys and maybe this group over here or some version hanging out there. So there's it's a ghost war with a phantom victory. It's kind of this, you're fighting smoke, where Iraq is just wrong, wrong, wrong. It was bogus, it was a lie. Tony Blair knew it, everyone knew it, and now everyone is, everyone has to cop to it. They won't, and no one's going to do any time. There'll be no trials. Dick Cheney will never see a day inside. This thing is far more foggy, and I don't think it's clear. And I think the fact that you have Barack Obama, everyone's kind of doing a wait-and-see thing. I wish that would be over with, and they'd say, Mr. President, I love you, man. I voted for you, but I'm mad as hell about this. Because I like that guy. I voted for him. But this Afghanistan thing stinks. And like I said, I don't know anything about this like he does. I disagree with it up, down, left, right, and center. And I am mad enough. But quite honestly, and this sounds like a real bummer, and I shouldn't say it to you, but I'm going to. I don't think those street gatherings really accomplish anything. In that the cops come and they crack your head open, and 80 people get dragged into jail and call mom and go home, and the government keeps on doing what they want, and the cops wipe your blood off their nightstick and call it a night. You know, I saw one thing in some documentary at one point, and some Republican guy said, "You Democrats, you go in the street and you get your head split open. We sit home and vote." And I went, you know what? He's got a point. And so I think maybe the White House and the Pentagon, all these people need to hear from us like, you want to stay in office, any of you elected officials, we'll just sit home, man. If you don't get out, we won't get out to vote for you. And we won't contribute, you know, we will just sit this one out. That is one way to go. But that take to the streets thing, I just never have seen anything come of it. WTO, 80 kids just get their noses pushed in by these cops. The meetings still happen. I don't have much faith in the people amassing unless we go hammer and tongs, storm the Bastille, and I don't advise that either, because there's a thing called the National Guard, and they'll just, you know, I don't want a Tiananmen Square. I don't want a Kent State. I don't want to see kids getting bones broken or worse. And so I don't have an answer for you. What I don't think is the way is like throwing garbage onto the lawn of the White House or lighting something on fire. Because then they go, guess what? We get to arrest you for that. And now we no longer take you seriously.
Well, we don't have a lot of time left, but I wanted to ask because, I mean, you've been doing what you do for a long time now, writing, performing, acting, your activism. You have quite possibly one of the better music collections of anybody I can think of. What drives you? You seem fairly tireless. You always have energy, and you're traveling the world. You're writing every single day, putting it up on your blog, on your website. What really pushes you and drives you? It's
a combination of things. Curiosity and anger are two major factors. And my anger, I'm a very angry man, but my anger does not compel me to put you down, kick a dog, or shove someone around or drink myself into a stupor and punch a hole in a wall. You get me mad, I go do a benefit. I go to a country where Bush said, oh, they're scary. One, please. I go right for it. And come back and go, they were cool to me, man. And the older I get, the more I want to improve things and say, hey, man, like, let's not bomb those guys. Let's go talk first. And so it's anger and curiosity and the fact that I have the means and that I can. And if I can, and I have the microphone, I have the access, I can come here and do this. If I don't act on that, what good am I? And if you are in a position to inspire and to influence for future good and have a cool time sticking it to the man before you shuffle off, why not get up early and get going? And that's what I do, and I'm probably a hyperactive maniac. But the older I get, the more interested in stuff I become, and I just book it and go. And, you know, the more I travel, the more I want to travel. The more I read, the more I want to read, et cetera, et cetera. And it's that. And also knowing that things can be so much better than they are, that we can have alternative energy sources, that we can get rid of homophobia and racism. America is like number 40-something in literacy in the world. That is appalling. And, you know, I think there's a concerted effort to keep some people at a certain economic level, a certain intellectual level, making for better prisoners, better soldiers, just better low life. So we can always go, oh, look at them. If everyone in this country had a pretty good education, that's when the prison's empty. That's when you say, let's go invade Iraq, and a bunch of people go, no, no way. And all of a sudden you have a peaceful country, and now Carlisle and Bechtel don't know what to do on Monday because no one's showing up for the war. And so that also fuels me. That kind of thing keeps me angry, awake, and on it, you know, to make things better and to basically, if Joe Strummer was around, he would hopefully go forward, my son. And that's it, basically. That's what gets me going.
Well, I thank you. Henry Rollins, thank you very much for joining Brave New Conversation.
Thank you.